Welcome to the Awakening Women podcast. I'm your host, Leanne Oaten, former therapist with over 11 years combined of counseling and coaching women into their power. And more recently, over the past 6 years, I have worked specializing in the area of helping women break the cycle of narcissistic abuse and leave destructive relationships. And in this episode, we're going to talk about emotional flooding and how you can become aware that this is happening to you, whether you are in one of these relationships where there is a lot of conflict, there's a lot of trauma response being triggered, and you start to feel out of control of your emotions. And this can also happen when you have left one of these relationships. It can happen in a relationship after a relationship like this that is healthier and is not the cause of the emotional flooding, but there can be repercussions when you have experienced this in the past, as well as when you have left a relationship like this and you still have to have contact with that person because of children. Just to give you a quick differentiation here, we have triggers, right? They're kind of the word that you hear out there. It can be something that is triggered that reminds you of the past. It could be past as in your childhood, things that happened to you in your formative years at school, with other people in your life, with traumas, as well as previous relationships. So these things can be triggered in a current new relationship, or they can be triggered by your ex relationship partner if you are still having to deal with them on a day-to-day basis. And so this is what I help women with, is really learning how to build that self-confidence when they are feeling these intense emotional triggers or these emotional feelings, and more importantly, the emotional flooding. So one of the things that I hear over and over again from women as one of the biggest reasons why they continue to stay in a relationship like this, and like, what are your biggest fears kind of scenario. And the biggest one of the top is, I'm afraid of my feelings and what's going to come up for me on the other side. So there's always a lot of fear around this, right? We just have to accept that there's going to be fear, and that doesn't mean we don't move forward, right? It's just that you need that. Oftentimes we need that accountability. Not everyone. Some people don't need that kind of support, but some people do. They need that extra hand holding and accountability, and someone walking with them step by step through some really difficult shit that can leave you feeling very triggered. It can trigger your abandonment wounds, and it can feel like you are going to die, like you're not going to be able to handle what is happening for some. And some of that is going to be the emotional flooding. So let's just go over a quick overview of what are some signs of emotional flooding, and then something you can do, one trick that you can do when this is happening in the moment. So the first is your mind starts racing. It's going a mile a minute. It's racing. It's just a sign that your fight or flight has turned on. You might get an upset stomach or nausea, or just not feeling very good in the tummy. You could be having feelings of anxiety. You could be feeling overwhelmed, or have a strong desire to escape or somehow stop the situation. You might want to run. You might want to walk away. You might feel like you want to just totally abort the situation. You also could be having some negative self-talk going on. And physically, you could be feeling really tense throughout your body. You could be clenching. You could have that feeling of, knot in your gut or clenching your gut, just tension. Trouble focusing, shallow and quick breathing, where it feels like you're not breathing correctly, and increased heart rate. So those are some signs that you have gone over. You've tipped yourself over that emotional scale. Now you're flooded. And this is a really difficult place to operate from. And if you're dealing with a triggering situation, especially in a relationship or with an ex that still is triggering your trauma, it can feel like you have no control over your emotions. And this is what I think a lot of women fear, is the inability to handle these types of emotions and feeling as if they're never going to be able to get over them or move past them, but we have to learn how to move past them. And yes, when we're going through the thick of something really scary, like a divorce, like escaping an abusive relationship, parenting with kids on the other side of one of these relationships, when you still have to have contact with this person who is continuing with some of those behaviors, you're going to need that support and the hand-holding from people who can help you keep taking the next step despite what big emotions might be coming up for you in those moments. And it's about learning that I have me, I've got me, and it's creating the internal emotional safety so that when you are flooded, so flooding is, it's more your emotional capacity has been maxed out, basically. If you think about anything flooding, you're over your max, right? It's overflowing. And so we need to, there's a few things you can do in these moments. So number one, it's being aware. Okay, I notice what's happening. And you might actually so you could also have, I should just go back to this, sorry. You could have the strong desire to want to escape the situation, but also be frozen in place and unsure what to do, what to say. And it's a really, it can be a scary feeling, right? Because it's like, what do I do in this? I want to run, I want to flee, but I also feel frozen. So, there's a fight, flight, freeze response. It's being aware of that. Okay, so it's being aware, here I am. I'm in this physical response of emotional flooding. You're having physical reactions. Okay, you're having, like we talked about, those physiological responses in those moments. So the best thing you can do when that is happening is, number one, be aware of it. Be aware that this is happening and orient yourself. Am I safe? Orient your surroundings. Orient yourself to your surroundings. Look around the room. Put your hands on your thighs. Like, just be in the space of, okay, this is what I'm experiencing. I'm feeling flooded right now. And a lot of women don't know what to do with that space. They want to call a friend. They want to make it go away instead of learning how to manage it on their own. They might end up drinking alcohol or doing something that is not going to help the situation, or you might end up reacting in a negative way to make things worse. So it is being aware, it's coming into the room, and then it is deciding when you feel like you're able to just go, okay, I just need a few minutes, or I need to go take a few minutes and do something else. You could go for a walk. You could go step outside for a breath of fresh air. You could go grab a glass of water. You can do literally anything in those moments when you're feeling emotionally maxed out, and move that energy through. So it's really important to understand the difference between being triggered. Triggered is often more just like, it's like a snap, knee-jerk response. That the way I see it is that's your kind of initial response when something from the past has been touched. But depending on your capacity, what that trauma is, what that trigger is, what it represents, what emotions are being brought into the now, if it's PTSD, if it's past trauma, you could then move into the emotional flooding state where you don't have the resources to actually process what's going on. So you need tools, and sometimes we need more tools. Sometimes we need different levels of support. We need extra hand-holding, someone that's there to help us through for that first while when things are really, really rough. And then as you start to build your confidence in yourself that you're going to be able to handle these moments and handle these times, they start happening less and less and less. Because the thing is that you don't feel safe within yourself. You haven't felt safe for a long time, if ever. You might even look back on your childhood and realize, I've never felt safe. Nothing ever felt safe. Or maybe there were times in your childhood you felt safe in certain situations or with certain family members, but maybe not at your home life. Or you felt safe at friends' houses, but not going home. And so you always felt unsafe in your body, Like no one was around to be there for you. And so all of that shit is being brought up when you leave a relationship, especially when there is some toxic, traumatic bonding there, where it is bringing up all of that past trauma. And then you leave a relationship like this. And this can also happen in relationships if there is not trauma. So I'm not saying that that has to be part of it. We can have abandonment wounding and have that activated when a relationship ends. That's just to say that for that aspect of it. But typically it's bringing up all of our abandonment wounds when we're in a relationship like this with an unavailable partner who is not there for us in the way that we need to be. It's triggering our childhood wounds, and this is going into attachment and all that. But our attachment wounds that have come up for us because of our childhood wounding and childhood traumas, they do come up in adult relationships. And the thing is that our partners are not responsible for healing that wound. We don't bring in our anxious attachment into things without taking full responsibility for that. But then also realizing you've been in a relationship that has done nothing but activate that within you. It is not a healing space. It is not a safe space for you to do that work. And so in order to do that work, to heal anxious attachment, you need to practice that with someone who's a safe space to work that out with. You're not going to be able to do it in a relationship with someone who is gaslighting you, who is twisting the reality, who is defensive, who throws everything back on you, who cannot take any responsibility, who's inconsistent. One day they're nicey nice, next day they're a complete and total asshole, or they're checked out, or they're nasty and say mean things to you, or they're blowing up, they're losing their cool, and you don't know what to expect. There's no consistency and there's no predictability in the relationship or the behavior. And anytime you bring up anything you want to talk about that you're not okay with, or that you're feeling upset about, or that you don't like, it blows up, kaboom, like right away. So you're getting into that flooding response probably on a daily basis. Okay, so we need to be aware of our responses in order to master them, to be able to understand them. And sometimes you won't understand them until the next day when you're back into balance. Or maybe it's a few hours later when you did go for that walk and you're able to see what was touched on, what happened, and we need to connect where that originates from. And this is why when I work with women, and they often will say things like, I have so much work to do on myself. I have so much healing. This is going to be so difficult. Like, I just know I have things I need to heal in my past. I just don't know where to start. And they get so wrapped up in that. And this is why I guide women to deal with the emotional material that's coming up in the moment. We don't need to go digging around and looking for stuff. We deal with it in the present moment, because that's when the past that has not been healed is going to come up in the present moment. And it's going to come up in various situations, but typically it's going to come up in new relationships. We can't fully heal all of that stuff when we're living alone with our dogs and not talking to anyone, right? The moment you get into a relationship with this unhealed, unprocessed stuff, you can best believe that it is going to come up. And so you need to have the tools and the understanding of what this actually is, and understanding what's being triggered from the past, what's happening in the now, and being able to discern that to make decisions. But when we feel unsafe in our bodies and in our own lives, it's really difficult to differentiate between what's a past trigger and what's a now trigger of something I really need to be paying attention to now. And so this is where developing that emotional mastery is so crucial. And this is the work that I do with women in my one-on-ones when I'm working with them privately. They get that daily hand-holding and that support and accountability as they're moving through this really difficult stuff. Because you don't know what's going to come out on the other side. You don't know. You don't know what's coming up for you. And yes, that can be scary. It's unknown territory. But it is doable. And when you come out of that and you're able to really master your triggers and master the fact that, yeah, I experienced relational trauma and it's had an impact, and I am capable of learning how to handle it moment to moment. And then we teach our children this skill. We teach our children how to be emotionally attuned and mature, and how to feel hard things and move through them despite that. So I hope this has been helpful, and maybe it's giving you some insight into what you're experiencing and you just maybe didn't have a word for it. Sometimes it helps to label something so that you have a meaning attached to it, in this sense that, a lot of times it's the word trigger is thrown around a lot, and it's like, what is a trigger, right? But it's really important to understand the difference between a trigger, which is something from the past that is reminding us of something in the now, and it can cause various reactions. It can cause an emotional outburst. It can cause you to say something really nasty in return. It's all of those things, but they're not as intense as when it comes to emotional flooding. And if you are in a bad, toxic, or narcissistic relationship, this flooding can come when you have someone doing the crazy making communication, the circular arguments, the gaslighting, the twisting, the throwing things back on you, all of that, because you're already emotionally flooded and triggered in that moment, and then that just keeps coming, and it can max out your capacity into a full-blown panic attack, or that, the sweating palms and the heart racing and all of it. You have to be aware of what's happening so that you know when someone is dangerous to you, right? This can happen in non-relationships too, right? Of course it can. This emotional flooding, if it's something that you are living that's coming forward in the now, or other phobias or things like that. So I just want to clarify that it doesn't always mean it's going to come up in relationship only, but being aware of what this is and recognizing it, and then taking care of yourself in those moments. Or if you have close people that you hang out with, or someone that you truly can count on, and that happens, and they realize that, then you can ask them for what it is that you need in those moments that it's happening as well. And having those key go-to support people to help you move through it will help you move through it faster, and it will become less and less of an issue over time. I'm going to put the link in the show notes, among other links, if you want to check out the ways that you can work with me or get further support. Thanks for hanging out with me today and listening to this episode. Be sure to come and follow me over on my account, Awakening Women Official, over on Instagram. I post there most days of the week. Come in and say hi and check out all of the content I have up in that community. And make sure that you subscribe to my email list. The links are in the show notes.